All living things were put on this earth by the Creator to be in harmony. Seek something like gold will lead you in disharmony.
He knew the gold was there, you see. He knew.
What gold?
The mother lode. The glory hole, lad, the very source of all the gold been washing down these streams for 10,000 years.
There's no gold.
Of course there is.
Where?
In the mine, for the love of God.
I was down there. It's nothing but country rock. There's nothing there.
There is!
Well, if you found a Rhoades gold mine, you'd be probably one of the richest men in the world.
It's just elusive. It's there, but who's going to find it and why?
People have hunted for the Rhoades mines now since the Mormons came to Utah.
It's a very, very, very mysterious situation.
It's not only a rich mine, it's Montezuma's treasures.
We have found treasure all through the area of Utah, northern Utah, and every single week we hear of other finds.
There is gold here. There is gold.
The best kept secret probably in the last 1,000 years.
I believe it. Most people don't, but I believe it.
The actual places are true and the treasure is there.
Amazing legends of lost gold mines in the high Uinta Mountains of Utah have been around for hundreds of years.
The Rhoades Mines consist of 7 sacred gold caverns hidden deep in the remote Uinta Mountains of Utah and allegedly hold a motherlode of gold that could pay off the national debt.
These mines were supposedly opened and worked by ancient Spanish explorers on traditional Ute Indian grounds. Many years later, Mormon pioneers settled in Utah, and the secret of the mines was given to church leader Brigham Young. He entrusted this knowledge to Thomas Rhoades and to his son Caleb Rhoades. The Rhoades family secretly extracted gold from the hidden mines for over 50 years and ultimately took this secret to their graves. Since that time, many have searched for the coveted clues to lead them to these legendary mines.
Those explorers, both past and present, who have hunted for these riches have often lost their wealth, their families, and sometimes even their lives. I'm Jabron Begum, and I grew up in Utah, fascinated by this complex story of conflict, greed, and betrayal.
I have read many books on the Lost Rhoades Mines subject, and on more than one occasion, I have found strong indications in the Utah mountains to support this great story. Many will state that this is just another fanciful treasure tale, but I disagree because of the evidence I have found. This is a journey through classic Rocky Mountain history, a quest to verify if the largest gold and silver vein is truly hidden in Utah's beautiful and remote Uinta Mountains.
The rugged and primitive Uinta Mountains cover approximately 3,500 miles of forested terrain and finding remnants of lost gold mines could prove to be an impossible task.
Quite a bit is hid, yeah. Quite a bit is hid back in the holes, hid purposely. Mother Nature's hid it.
Well, you got to realize there was 7 mines that Caleb Rhoades worked, and Thomas. Okay, the mine that everybody talks about, the Rhoades mine, the big mine. There's no gold bars in it. It's gold. It's rock rotten with gold.
Caleb had 7 gold sources that he claimed that he brought gold out.
We head out to the Utah State Prison and visit with Kerry. He co-authored the Lost Rhoades Mines flagship book, Footprints in the Wilderness.
After Thomas Rhoades had made several trips for several years into the mines, he became too ill to make the trip. So he made arrangements for his son, Caleb Rhoades, to make the trip in his stead. He was compelled, if that's the proper word, to take a blood oath that he would never reveal the location to any man. And that blood oath included Brigham Young and anyone else. He was the only man who was ever allowed to know this. Caleb never made himself wealthy from this. He was a very generous man. Caleb said it wasn't necessary to mine the mine. It was only necessary to load the packs and return with them.
Caleb had the opportunity to visit mines that the Spanish worked in Rock Creek and Fall Creek, Lake Fork above Moon Lake. Several of these old mines were ancient mines.
Personally, I think that's why the Spaniards came here to begin with. You know, history books talk about Escalante coming up here, and for what purpose?
It was for riches, for wealth. And it was the only reason they came. It wasn't for any other reason.
Caleb Rhoades was given the secret of the mines by his father, Thomas Rhoades. This leaves me wondering how Thomas originally learned about these mines, which had been hidden by the Ute Indians for hundreds of years.
Brigham Young knew the key to survival in the Utah land was to make peace with the Ute Indians. After leading the Mormon people into the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, he made a secret agreement with Ute Indian Chief Wakera, also known as Chief Walker.
And Walker had ostensibly seen a vision from Towatch, the Great Spirit. In this vision, he had been told that the High Hats would come, which eventually proved to be the Mormons. Chief Walker agreed that someone could go to the mines and bring the gold out for the benefit of the church. But it could only be one man that both the whites and the Indians would trust.
Thomas Rhoades was singled out by Brigham Young as the most trusted man to work with the Indians to get the gold, a certain amount of gold, out of the Uinta Mountains for the church.
Thomas Rhoades traveled under the cover of night into the high Uinta Mountains. He returned nearly 3 weeks later with 60 pounds of gold to be used for the struggling Mormon church.
There's only one sacred mine, but there's a lot of them Spanish mines that he was taking that gold out of.
Many of the prospectors who seek after the Rhoades gold believe that these mysterious mines are of Spanish origin. Thomas Rhoades originally worked the Sacred Mine, which was the mine given to Brigham Young from Ute Chief Walker. However, during the 2 years that Thomas worked the Sacred Mine, he found other Spanish mines in the Uinta Mountains.
Caleb Rhoades, you know, he's supposed to have found all this gold scattered from Vernal, Dry Fork area all the way to Salt Lake. So they was all over the mountains. You know, if there's one mine, one vein of gold, there's got to be another somewhere.
There was a massacre of Spaniards and Mexicans south of Salt Lake in a place called Chicken Creek. And Brigham Young sent Thomas Rhoades and a man down there to investigate the massacre. They went in, they found the bodies of the massacred Spaniards, and while going through their belongings, Thomas Rhoades uncovered some maps. And they were written and drawn by a man by the name of Antonio Ronaldo. And they showed rich gold mines, rich silver mines in the high Uinta Mountains of Utah. the Spaniards were transporting this gold down the old Spanish Trail and on their way back to Santa Fe.
To learn more about the old Spanish mining activity in Utah, we head out to Dry Fork Canyon in the Uintas. We began our quest by speaking to two prospectors, Paul and Randy. Their families have a rich history in Utah mountain lore.
Spaniards come through. There's a lot of evidence of Spanish activity around the area.
There's a lot of different mines up here, and they're in different areas, and it's just not a matter of, it was a matter of which one they could get to where, you know, they wouldn't be seen.
I asked Paul if he has ever seen evidence of minerals from the Rhoades Mines, and he gives an answer that is quite unique for a prospector in this region.
This is what's gold to me, is this green stuff up here. This is my livelihood, this feed up here. And this don't come up without water. I need to put water on it. I got pasture lands and stuff. You take my water away from it, we got problems.
Paul's a hard-working cattle rancher. That summer, another drought had plagued Utah. While chasing some stray cattle into the upper hills, Paul found remnants of old Spanish gold smelters.
This tells you this son of a bitch has been hot. Hot, melt something. You get down below, you find these that are, you know, that's more like this, it's bare, that it hasn't been hot. But you get these, you see this glazing here, right here, it's thick too. This son of a gun's been used over and over again. These were here long before this country was even settled. These were old when this country was settled.
The Spaniards built these smelters to process the ore that they mined, melt it down into gold bars, load it onto ships off Florida and Mexico, and sail the loot back to Spain. One of these Spanish ships, the Atocha, was loaded with over $100 million worth of gold and treasure. It is believed that much of this gold originated from the Uinta Mountains of Utah. When the famous treasure hunter Mel Fisher uncovered the Atocha, he found an authentic map leading to gold mines.
Mel said that he had a map, there was a goatskin map that came off the Atocha, that when they unraveled it and looked at it, it was northern Utah.
The Spaniards would actually dig the gold. They would make them out into gold bars, gold ingots, whatever. And the Indians then would massacre the Spaniards, retrieve the gold bars, take them back, and hide them, bury them.
No question of what them Spaniards were here. That Angel Moroni out there in Salt Lake is plated with the gold out of the sacred mine.
AC is probably the oldest, most colorful, and well-respected Lost Rhoades prospector still alive.
I found a lot of important information. Did you hear there's been one of them caches found by an old Spanish smelter? They found a cache over there. This guy's got an instrument that goes deep instead of like our metal detectors. And an Indian told them about it, and they found this, had an old Spanish breastplate over it. And one of the boys is driving a brand new truck that he bought with some of his money from, and the other one bought him an airplane. But anyhow, they were told about these caches by a Ute.
There are many gold bars, caches, and such all over. Many of these still protected by the Utes.
The Ute Reservation encompasses much of the Uinta Mountains. Paul is an Uncompahgre Ute Indian. Even though the state of Utah is named after the Utes, very little is spoken about their people, their culture, and their battle for land against Western invaders. After the Spanish mining activities ceased around 1814, the Utes had to deal with another migration of people who were seeking natural resources, the Mormon pioneers. In 1847, the Mormons fled west from Illinois. They were in search of a land where they could safely practice their religious way of life. When the Mormons arrived in the Salt Lake Valley, they thought the land was free for their taking, but they were mistaken. This area had been inhabited by the Utes for hundreds of years.
The largest band of the Utes was at Utah Lake. They were called by the Spanish Y-U-T-A, or Y-U-T-A-H, Utah.
The principal group, because they were mounted, were Utes, and so the Utes had traversed this whole territory.
You know, it is believed my tribe is the first people that's acquired the horses. You know, a lot of tribes have seen them before the Utes, but the Utes were the most brazen to go in and actually take these horses from the Spanish and learn how to utilize them.
To the Utes, all the gold in the Uintas is sacred.
But a lot of those mines had Indian bloodshed in those mines. That's what makes them sacred. They're burials. Not because of the gold content, it's because of what happened there.
The reason they don't want anybody to find these mines is because their people were enslaved.
There is evidence to suggest that supposedly the Spaniards enslaved and massacred the Ute Indians. The Spaniards forced the Utes to open the mines, dig and haul the ore, and also build the smelters for processing the gold bars.
Normally the Spaniards built their smelters between 1 and 3 miles from a mine, so this would be a good indication that there's mineral in this area, especially this big one. The amount of glaze and mineral that's deposited on these rocks, there's an awful rich mine around here somewhere.
Paul grew up in the Uinta Mountain region. After a little cattle prodding on our part, he agrees to guide us on our search for the mines. We begin in the area near the hidden Spanish smelters.
Down there.
They don't exist. Only in the mine.
Me and Steve right above the waterfall.
Not good.
This is it.
Clean out. See that Larry saw stuff that were following that in.
Sure is caved in, ain't it?
Yeah. Looks like it went way back in there at one time. Shit.
Yep, this out. That's it. There were a series of earthquakes in the late 1800s which caused a lot of disruption in many of these old mines. The damage from those earthquakes may have caused these mine shafts to collapse. We head to the town of Roosevelt, which is the epicenter of prospecting in the Uinta Basin. The Frontier Motel is legendary in Wild West lore, and for years, old-timers would exchange their valuable information about the Rhoades Mines over go-go juice, which is what they call coffee. While looking for a prospector named Greg at the Frontier, we run into an ex-prospector who was put in a few too many days on the elusive Rhoades Trail.
Do you believe that the Lost Rhoades gold mines exist?
Hell, I don't really know. They just kill a lot of minerals so they can have it for wilderness.
In Roosevelt, looking for accurate information about the Rhoades mines can be both rewarding and dangerous. Prospectors are usually paranoid to a certain degree, and most guard their precious clues like it was the actual gold. I walked a fine line in trying to earn the prospectors' trust by making them understand that I was only out to document the existence of the mines.
and not out to steal their secrets for profit. In a small town such as this, I learned quickly that you do not want to cause a stir in the hornet's nest when searching for the truth.
Greg wasn't at the bar, but we met up with him later. He was poring over detailed maps, which he has compiled over 30 years. His intricate maps hold a copious amount of information about the Rhoades mines.
There's a very proprietary perspective placed on any sources of maps and information in the small community of prospectors who look in the Uintas for these mines. Because in theory, any one of these mines could make someone rich. And so people hold dearly to any maps they have.
I do have a couple maps that were drawn by Caleb, and I won't divulge that information because I'm searching for those mines at this time. I do know the approximate location.
We head up Rock Creek Canyon with Greg and follow the same Uinta route that Caleb Rhoades used when he traveled to the mines.
Essentially, the Spanish had a well-marked trail system that they followed to make it easier for the subsequent groups of Spaniards to enter the areas of interest and reopen the mines. So they were well marked, but you had to understand the code that was developed by the Spaniards for following those trails.
Greg feels that he has unlocked the code of the Spanish trail marker system.
It's usually a system of monuments and slightly modified natural structures and formations combined with semi-permanent rock and tree markings. Now, a lot of the tree markings, of course, are now gone.
Greg shows us how these Spanish markings point to a mine in the near vicinity.
This was one of the entrances that Caleb Rhoades used to, and Spanish used to enter one of the deposits underground that he was interested in.
June has scoured the Uintas in search of the Rhoades mines longer than most prospectors. He's one of the few who knew Abe Powell, Caleb Rhoades' nephew.
I knew Abe Powell very well. He, of course, was 12, 13 years old when Caleb Rhoades was alive, and used to sit on Caleb Rhoades' knees, and Caleb would sit and tell him stories about the mines and where he went. And he'd seen the gold many times that his uncle had brought out of the mountains, and even accompanied Caleb on several occasions to the area east of Tapiona. And he says, Caleb used to get gold right there.
As Caleb grew older, many learned that he knew the location of the sacred mine. The inherent dangers of going to the mine became greater for Caleb. Caleb was often hunted and ambushed by gold-seeking bandits. Unfortunately for the bandits, Caleb was an impeccable marksman. It became evident to Caleb that he needed protection for his journeys to the mines. He needed someone he could trust, and that duty went to a Ute named Happy Jack.
Happy Jack wore the traditional Indian garb, except he preferred a cavalry jacket. But Happy Jack, above all, was a prospector. That's all he ever really was interested in doing.
Caleb would meet Happy Jack at a location at the junction of Rock Creek and the Duchesne River. Branching out from this spot is the trail they rode to the mines.
Happy Jack was raised in Hebron. I remember him. I was a little man, a little kid, and he used to come to our place. Up at the ranger station, he'd stay 2 or 3 weeks, and he'd go out riding around in the mountain. Now, Happy Jack supposedly knew where Rhoades' mines was. My dad even mentioned that one time that him and Happy was up on this ridge, and he pointed out like that, and he said, "See that big pine over there?" He said, "That's where I used to guard Rhoades when he went in to get that gold up, and he said I'd watch his back so that nobody would follow him. He said that's where I stayed, by that pine. And one thing I guess I could often wonder about is that I never asked my dad, where was that?
Happy Jack kept detailed journals and maps of every area that he searched and every location that he found. And these were particularly valuable in later years when he struck up his association with Caleb Rhoades, because he noted some of the places that they had gone to together.
Not only did Happy Jack keep detailed journals and drawings about the mines, but so did Caleb. He made approximately 5 maps that show the general location of the mines.
Happy Jack's journals and his maps became kind of a prized possession among treasure hunters. They knew that if they could locate these, that it would pinpoint the areas that Caleb went to on his regular trips to the mine. And it's very difficult to even talk about Happy Jack's journals and maps because they were in my possession at one time. I had to return all of those back to the Ute people, and they repose today with the family, and they've never been published and never will be revealed, because among them are maps to the sacred mines.
Caleb Rhoades gave most of the gold from the mines to the growing Mormon church. This helped fuel their unstoppable acquisition of native Ute lands.
Well, the way the Mormons did, of course, was to change the environment quite dramatically here in Utah. They eliminated a lot of predators, a lot of indigenous wildlife. They moved the Native Americans from the area where they were living eventually.
There was an initial effort to try to build good relationships between the Mormons and the Indians. The Mormons had, as part of their cultural belief, the idea that Indians were a chosen people, and that was their mission to convert the Indians to Mormonism.
The Mormon settlers moved in here. Their thinking was to baptize us, to save us, because they didn't see any value in our existence, yet we've been here eons.
There were so many Mormons who had moved southward, and they knew the Indians would be a problem. So they went down to what is now Provo and founded Fort Utah, a fort. And they put 12-pound cannons on each corner, as the Journal of the Lead Settler said, to intimidate the Indians. And they needed to intimidate them because there was a better amount of fish and a substantial farming area. And so you had competition.
In the mid-1850s, there was a punitive expedition that was organized by Brigham Young as governor of Utah Territory against some Indians he understood were renegades and who were not following the main tribes and were continuing to raid white people in the Utah Valley. And that was a pretty devastating reprisal on the part of the territorial militia, and they killed some dozens of Indians and basically harassed the Indians out of Utah Valley, and that was really what opened Utah Valley to white settlement.
It was a complete displacement of the people, and genocide for the most part, destruction of the culture of the Indian people.
Caleb's eccentric friend, Aaron Daniels, was one of the few people who knew the mine's locations. Aaron enjoyed drinking, and he practiced polygamy. One of his wives, an Indian named Rose, possibly used her influence with the Utes to help Aaron find the sacred mine.
He was a regular old Westerner, I would say. Got to prospecting, and he found some mining properties up in the head of Daniels Canyon, and he may have had access to gold somewhere.
Aaron was blindfolded and taken into that mine. It's all in the book about, in his diary. I got his whole diary in there. But he was taken into that mine. And there was sacks of gold right after he got in the entrance, and then 2 big veins of ore running right up the roof of that.
He had some maps, and he wanted his wife, Rose, to have these maps so she could take care of her family. And she took the maps and burned them because she didn't want her family to have any friction and fighting over money.
Even though Rose Daniels burned many of Aaron's treasure maps, his detailed daily journal survived. In an entry dated July 1895, only a few months before his death, he recorded the following.
I learned the location of the sacred mine. I've often been asked why I haven't profited from that knowledge. I took an oath not to reveal its location. This I owe in loyalty to the Mormon Church, who have heard Rhoades say the gold belongs to. I have also discovered other old mines worked by the Spaniards, which will yet prove to be as valuable as the sacred mine.
Brigham Young told the people in Utah, the Mormon people, he said, "We will not dig in the earth for riches, we will plant and become farmers for riches."
Shortly after the Mormons came to Utah, Brigham Young said, there's gold, there's silver in these hills, but that's not what we're here for. So he counseled people to not even try to find it, that they needed to be busy farming oats and potatoes and wheat and raising cattle and sheep. And that's what his population mainly did. He condemned people who were going to California, saying that they were seeking after worldly things. So he was opposed to it. He was also fearful that if mining of gold and silver took place here, that would bring a flood of people from all over the world, and that the Mormon population would simply be inundated by that flood, and he would lose the opportunity to build the kingdom of God as he understood it here in the Great Basin. So he was opposed to gold and silver mining all the way, except that they needed gold and silver in order to pay for imported goods.
Under Brigham Young's direction, he started a mint because coinage was so scarce at that time, and getting supplies from the east was a major importance. That the best way to do that was doing it with gold, and because measuring gold dust was such a difficult thing to do to be accurate, they felt that it would be easier to do if they put it into coin form.
One of the rare pieces of gold you can buy is called Mormon gold. And a $10 Mormon gold piece costs you in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000 because of the rareness of it. Now, it would surprise a lot of people to know that they still have a lot of this Mormon gold locked up in their safes and so on in the churches.
It was very difficult as far as having money. That's why they did so much in the way of creating their own paper money backed by gold, which was the first gold-backed paper money in the United States. They reissued the Kirtland notes in 1849, having Brigham Young, Newell K. Whitney, and Heber C. Kimball sign them, and they were backed by the gold that came in.
The gold that Rhoades gave to Brigham Young was supposedly the gold that was used to mint the Mormon coins and plate the Moroni statue that adorns the top of the Mormon Salt Lake Temple. We met up with a young prospector who uses his talent for flight to search for the Rhoades Mines. His name is the Sundance Kid, because when he searches for the mines, he always manages to borrow someone's plane. We search the south flank of the Uinta Mountains and spot important features below that have a direct correlation to Aaron Daniels' diary map.
There's a map in there showing they're drawn by Aaron Daniels, and everybody thinks that's right over in the foot of Crow Creek, which is the bottom end of Lake Mountain.
These particular features lead us to believe that we're in the vicinity where Aaron Daniels traveled. But we're not the only ones looking for gold in this area. We came across a group of weathered prospectors who have their own unique insights on the Rhoades legend.
I want proof, okay? Proof right now the Spaniards were here.
They didn't care about water, they didn't care about cattle. They wanted this monetary value, the silver, they wanted the fucking gold. And just to prove to you that the Spanish were there over a period of time, there's something there.
Listening to Paul Tabby made us realize the mystery that shrouds the Rhoades legend. As night turned into day, a prospector approached us who claimed to know a mine that Aaron Daniels had worked.
I don't know if you're familiar with Aaron Daniels' stories or not, but this is probably one of the things that he talked about in there at the base of the mountain.
While hiking a portion of the old Spanish trail, we came across trees that had old axe cuttings, probable evidence the Spaniards were mining in this area. Nearby trees were needed to support the weak mine tunnels.
How old do you suspect this hole is?
At least 150, maybe 200 years. Look at how big around the tree is that's growing out of the tailings, but it's been covered up really good.
Do you know if anything's been taken out of this hole?
I can't talk to you about that.
But you have some ideas?
Some people might.
In our search of the mine, we find wood beams that are similar to the ones used by the Spanish. We did not find any gold, but we're told that gold bars have been removed by prospectors. They rarely speak of their treasure finds because of the ARPA Act.
ARPA protects archaeological resources on the public or Indian lands. And the archaeological resources are defined as material remains of past human life or activities that are of archaeological interest that are at least 100 years of age. Now, the type of Spanish artifacts and items that may have been left behind, if such items were found, or any particular item of that kind was found, if it was found on public lands, whether it be Park Service, Forest Service, BLM land, or any of the Indian lands, those items would be protected by ARPA.
We meet up with the head state archaeologist, Dr. Jones.
We know that the Spanish explorers came through the area in late 1700s, but there are lots of stories about the Spanish having found gold and mined gold and having made arrangements with the Indians. We would certainly much rather see a Spanish gold bar where they are found and in their original context, to be able to document whether they really truly are from that time period, to be able to do dating of the surrounding materials, to look at any associated artifacts, to really try and place them in time. But unless we can do that, someone could show me something. If someone shows me a pot or an arrowhead that's taken out of context, it loses most of its information value. We're not digging it up just to find something that we can put on display in a museum.
I don't think the government should have 100% control of it, because what do they do with it? They find it, they stick it in a goddamn little cubby hole somewhere and nobody can see it. You and I can't go see some of the stuff they found. Why not? The government don't own it. Why shouldn't we all be able to see it? Why should we not be able to go in and look at it and admire it?
The gold of the Uintas truly belongs to the Ute Indians. I believe that Caleb Rhoades knew where most of the ore bodies were in the Uintas, had assigned a relative value to each of those ore bodies and subsequent mines in Rock Creek.
The incredible expanse of the Rock Creek area that Caleb mined is too vast to cover on foot. Gibran takes a power chute flight and covers 3 months of searching in just one day. This is one way to search for mines, flying high above the pine trees with a lawnmower propeller strapped to your back. The pilot of this unique craft is John. He's a prospector who uses this machine's bird-like features to hunt for the mines.
Okay,
right down through there. There's a fairly good shot.
Upon finding this mine, we noticed it had been purposely covered up with aspen trees a long time ago. Once inside, we were greeted with a labyrinth of secondary shafts. Even though there were large support beams, we were wary of the mine's structural damage. Each step seemed to grumble with stories that the mine wanted to keep secret. We were stopped prematurely due to a cave-in from a collapsed beam. This cave-in reminds us of a story about a famous Uinta Mountain cave-in over 50 years ago. That collapse was accidentally caused by John Young and LeVar Schertz at the Lost Josephine mine.
One time my grandfather has described and told me of a door that was in there that seemed to be of Spanish origin. It was very old and it was holding up collapsed ceilings.
LeVar said it had two big posts on the side, and he said it had one across the top that was up against the ceiling. And he said, and then the interior part of the door was slabs that they had cut with flat axes and made a thick timber door out of it, and there was hinges on the left side. He said, but we couldn't open the door. And I said, why not? And he says, because it had a big chain around it all the way. He said it was a huge chain, and in the center of the chain it was a big lock that was bigger than a man's hand, a huge lock with a keyhole that was over an inch tall. And he said, we couldn't figure out how to get beyond that door.
LeVar was a skinny man, and he was able to partially squeeze his arm through a thin crack next to the old wood door. To his surprise, he felt what he thought was a stack of gold bars behind that door.
John said, I'm going to bring some dynamite and I'm going to blow it down. He put 2 sticks at the top and 2 sticks at the bottom and one in the center of the door. Now, he had placed them in the wood portion, you know, not where there was any rock. He was just placing it in the wood part of the door. Anyway, he said they put some fuses on them and then tied them together and along, and then they took a short fuse and timed it, and then they put a big long one on there, and they lit it. He says, well, we better get the hell out of here. And he says, we got out of there as fast as we could. He says, we had plenty of fuse. He said, we didn't go out and sit on the front of the mine like before. He says, we went up and sit on top of the hill, waiting for it to blow, he says. Blow it did. He said it shook the whole damn hill we was sitting on.
Since the explosion and unfortunate cave-in of the Lost Josephine mine, many prospectors have made unsuccessful attempts to bore through to the main shaft. The Josephine is considered by many to be one of the Lost Rhoades mines, and the ability to break through the layers of rubble could prove to be a lucrative endeavor. But death and bloodshed have soaked these rock walls.
Well, I think the forced labor that the Spanish imposed on the Utes operating the various mines in the Uintas was such to where it became unbearable to the Utes, and they finally rebelled. And a great number of Utes were killed, and large numbers of Spaniards were killed. The Josephine on Hoyt Peak, that particular mine, out of 42 miners, only 9 of them made it back to Mexico City.
According to an old Spanish waybill, which is a handwritten treasure map, there was an exit of the Lost Josephine mine that was 400 yards from the entrance to the mine. This secondary exit was used by Spaniards to pull gold out from within the mountain. Many scholars believe this covered-up exit to be the Bear Hole.
John West Young and LeVar Schertz, my grandfather, they had determined that the Josephine would probably be in the area that Bear Hole is in.
Dave agrees to walk in his grandfather's faded footprints and explore the Bear Hole with us. Dave set up a rope system for a rappel through a snug hole into the subterranean caverns below. We descended into the dark abyss and landed on moss-covered boulders. Climbing over them, we found collapsed wooden beams. We couldn't get past the rotted timbers, and we were left wondering how close we were to the gold bars that LeVar supposedly once held. We hunt down an old-timer named Calvin. He has spent more than 60 years exploring the Uintas and claims to have found Caleb's secret mountain cabin. He also believes that he has found one of the 7 Rhoades mines.
I wound up in a thick grove of pines, real thick, and I took my raincoat off and put over me, and about 2 hours while the blizzard subsided, and I jumped up and shook the snow off, and I was getting ready to put it on my horse when I see 2 rock rabbits come up through this rock slide. And I thought, well, that's sure funny. So I went over to investigate with a flashlight. I was inquisitive to what this was, and there was 5 steps going down into this mine. And I found an old axe head. It had Spanish writings on it. And I knew that there must be something to this mine. But I put a big rock back over the hole and stuff, and I could go today and dig it out, but the forest won't permit me to do that. The Forest Service said if you found all these gold bars and stuff, why there'd be a gold rush up there, and we couldn't control it. And so I signed a waiver that I wouldn't take anybody in or prospect that mine. I think someday, sometime, the Lord will make this manifest for somebody to locate it, and it'll be probably the church that will do that.
Many believe that the Rhoades gold, mines, and artifacts belong to the Lord, and that the Mormon Church is the protector of these precious items.
Brad, do you know if the church has any of the Mormon maps? Something that shouldn't be a secret, per se. Like Caleb Rhoades, Thomas Rhoades, anything that could help lead to the discovery of the Rhoades mines?
Yeah, I believe that they do. In fact, that I know that they do. And those are held for perhaps purposes and reasons in the future. I personally believe that some of the gold that is cached in the Uintas, whether it's on Indian land or not, can possibly be sacred gold, and that gets into a religious aspect also. And perhaps some of that will be brought out in the last days to build Zion and to do other things with. And only the brethren and the Lord knows that.
Researchers speculate that not only does the Mormon Church have the priceless Rhoades maps and documents, but that they have them secretly locked away. 2 such possible locations are the church office building in Salt Lake City and the Mormon Granite Vault in nearby Little Cottonwood Canyon.
I do know that the Mormon people have a vault, a storage in those mountains where they have stored a lot of valuable, not only history, but I'm sure there's precious metals, and who knows, maybe even the gold. Maybe the Rhoades gold mine has been discovered. Maybe it's already been locked away.
They kept very good records. You can look through the entries of the ledgers that the church maintains. It has it very well documented as to what gold transactions took place, on what dates, how much, what was measured, what was signed for. I mean, they did a very good, detailed ledger entry system that documented everything that they did so that there was a checks and balance in place.
I've been told that there is some documentation in the church vaults that clearly states Thomas Rhoades and also Caleb Rhoades bringing gold to Brigham Young and that gold being accounted for. Do you know if that is true, and have you seen any of that type of paperwork?
I can't comment on that. I will leave it at this, that I do believe that that is true. Yes, definitely.
Say if, for instance, you're watching ants and you watch which food they go after or what's valuable to them, and they take them into their hole. We Utes were the same way. Watch the Mormons when they came in. Watch what was valuable to them. And so as soon as that gold, as soon as you brought that out, it's just like I said, that's the sickness that our people talk about, is that greed. He knew what that meant. He knew what that would bring to his people, and so shake hands with one and take the gold, or seek the gold with the other.
We proceed to the Mormon Temple Square in Salt Lake City to seek information on the Mormon connection with the Rhoades mystery.
So how did the church get the gold for the gold coins and the Moroni? That's what we're trying to find out.
I think they traded farm products for whatever gold they needed.
Any idea where we might be able to find the records to look into the Lost Rhoades Mines, the gold that came from the High Uinta Mountains?
And the historical department is here, and you might check with them. Yeah, they will allow a certain amount of questioning on that. Yeah, they will help straighten you out on that.
The official Mormon comment on the Rhoades Mines is no comment. Even though Brigham Young had the gold extracted from the mountain mines, it was the Ute Indians who were the true guardians of those secret areas. Today, many prospectors believe that the Utes hold the keys to unlocking these locations.
Do you believe that the gold does lie on Ute land?
Absolutely.
Do you believe that there are Utes alive today that know of the location of some of this gold in these mines?
Oh, yes. I believe many of them know where it is. Or should I say, deposits of it.
An intriguing theory is that the Ute Indians guard more than just the gold mines, that they protect the treasure of the ancient Aztec people. In 1521, the Spaniard Hernando Cortez landed in Mexico and was believed to be a godlike figure by the Aztecs. Cortez wanted only treasure, and the Aztec Emperor Montezuma soon realized this. Shortly before Montezuma was murdered by Cortez, he sent the Aztec treasure 2 moons north, which many believe to be the location of the Uinta Mountains. Caleb Rhoades supposedly once viewed this coveted treasure site. Today, Kerry Boren claims to have been taken by the Utes to this amazing cavern known as Kerry Shinab.
Kerry Shinab just absolutely overwhelms all of the mines put together. It is tremendous. It apparently was the original mine of the Aztec. It's greater than all of the other mines that were mined in later years. It was very, very carefully hidden and covered up. When the Aztecs left this region, it was obliterated. There was no sign or indication. Caleb Rhoades used to say, when he was asked if these government prospectors might find some of the things that he was looking for, he would laugh and say they could walk right over the top of it and never know it was there. This has been the repository not only of Montezuma's treasure, but it's also a sacred burial place for many of the tribes of the Ute Nation for many, many years. And in fact, Chief Walker is buried there. Kerry Shinab is quite near a lake. And this lake is such, there is an entrance, but if you remove the stones to enter in, it's blocked at one point. If you remove the stones from that entrance, the entire lake floods the tunnel. You enter, finally, through this tunnel, you enter a huge cavern. The first thing that you encounter are corpses, most of them in sitting positions against the wall or leaning against the wall, some of them with their heads tied up in bandages. This is basically the burial area for the chiefs. There are other caverns at the top of an incline. Most of them are man-made. Many of the artifacts of Montezuma's treasure are stored inside of those rooms. Several of the rooms are literally carved out of solid gold. It appears that this whole chamber was once a molten gold that they had mined out. I was also told not to remove anything. I could look, but I couldn't remove anything from the site at all. The initial impression was fear more than anything. To betray even one of those confidences would have left me there permanently.
The search for the mines has been a cursed nightmare for many who have gone after its riches. We visit with Chunky, a legendary Ute prospector who grew up in the jagged shadow of the Uinta Mountains.
There is a curse. When I say there's a curse, if they want you to have it or see it or whatever, they'll let you see it. But if you're up there playing around, they'll take you in a minute.
And who is they?
The spirits.
That's true, I've felt it. If I was after the gold, I think I'd have been gone a long time ago.
And once it scares the hell out of you, you won't go back. Guaranteed.
We travel across the Uinta Basin and visit with Arden, the sheriff in this Wild West area for over 16 years. He has seen his fair share of unexplained deaths of prospectors.
Most people are a little afraid to go after it because some say it's protected by evil spirits, some say it's protected by the Indian, some say that if you get involved with it, you're going to get hurt or killed. And there's been some incidents that have taken place up there where people have lost their lives and in searching for the mine.
One day, I went up to the mine, and Gale had a heart attack, and he died in my arms. And I kept him alive for 20 minutes with trying to resuscitate him, and it just didn't work. But he did die at the mine.
Bill Hartzell was up looking for a mine in the Duchesne River that him and Caleb Rhoades discovered many years ago, but he never did reach it. He took a heart attack, and his shovel and pack was still on his back when we found him, and he never ever got to the mine.
John Harms loaded on a horse and took him up this old trail I'm telling you about, and he was going to show him that mine. But when he got up on top, been all timbered over to where you couldn't find any of his markings and that, and then he had a heart attack on top of that, and they damn near lost him.
For some reason, they still don't know why, for some reason the dynamite went off, killed one guy and crippled the other one real bad. And so they gave up the operation. Forget that, we're not going to do that anymore.
Don't mess, I don't fool or play with those mines. My father passed away about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was the last one that I know. I think there's only one more left that had taken that vow.
And that vow is?
Don't go near the mine.
We follow a lead to an area of the Uintas near the old Ute Treaty Line. Legend has it that a fierce battle between the Utes and the Spanish occurred near this mine over 200 years ago.
There he goes into the depths of hell. That thing crawling around back there in the back, you better take this camera to take a picture of it.
Don't go near the mine.
So anyway, whoa, bats! Did you see him?
Yeah. Is that what all this stuff is?
I have no idea what all this stuff is. That came right at me. All right, I think I'm done.
Is it on my back too?
No, well, you got a few cactus in your back, but mostly it's your arm. Workman's comp. Grab a stick and do that, or you're gonna wind up with them in your hands bad. You got any duct tape, Jim?
Yeah.
That duct tape will work better than anything to get that out.
I'll just do the initial.
In my own strange way, I suppose I've tasted the curse of the Rhoades Mines. However, I fared better than most.
I won't go up there. And I won't show anybody where it's at. All I say is in those mountains.
Chunky passed away soon after this interview took place. It added a weight of melancholy to our quest for the truth of the Rhoades gold that we have not yet found. After following these endless trails, I am feeling a sense of wanderlust and skepticism. And for the first time, I feel the strain of self-doubt as I now question this legend's validity.
The one unifying thread through every lost treasure tale that you've ever heard is emphasis on the word lost.
We take a long, dusty drive out to the Douglas Ranch, which is conveniently located 100 miles from nowhere.
Gold's only going to occur in certain kinds of geology, and it's not right. It's everything's got to be right for it to occur. And most of this stuff around here, it just isn't right.
So is there still gold in them there hills of Utah?
A little bit. Probably not worth going after. Those old timers got it. Well, those guys had their nose down on the ground and they didn't miss much.
Why is gold so exciting?
You tell me, man, that's been that way as far back as history goes, you know. So the recorded history's always been gold. People just want to have it and hold it. Well, I don't understand that.
It makes them crazy. It does. Makes everybody crazy. I think that's why the Indians like to stay away from it, like to keep it hidden.
A theory is that the Uinta Mountains do not contain the proper geology to contain gold. We seek out a scientific pro, Bob.
This big sort of zone right across here, this is the Uinta Mountains. Down here, this is the Uinta Basin, and over here is the Wasatch Front. Gold can form in a lot of different ways. I mean, you get gold in high-grade metamorphic rocks where it's sort of leached out and been circulated during the metamorphism and focused along large fractures. You can get gold outside of intrusive bodies where it forms little veins.
And the fluids that are expelled during this metamorphism are the fluids that transport the gold. And so far as I know, we found nothing like that in the Uinta Mountains.
If I was looking, I'd look along the cracks here, along the fault zones of fractures, things here that we might have actually had a big fluid system being developed in the Uinta Basin, which goes down quite a ways, and you can get some big convection systems going in here.
I'd look along the faults. I'd look along the South Flank Normal Fault, for example. That would be, in my view, the prime place to explore for gold or silver or whatever valuable materials you were interested in.
You sound skeptical about large gold deposits being in these Uinta Mountains.
The thing is, people have been wandering around, no one's found them yet.
There is probably gold in the Uinta Mountains, but I'm skeptical that there would be a very large deposit of gold there.
Have you heard of anyone finding gold up in the Uinta Mountains?
I have indeed been in contact with the prospector in Duchesne who claims to have found a little gold up in the Uinta Mountains.
We meet up with this prospector in Duchesne. Russ owns mining claims on a beautiful ridge in the Uinta Mountains. He grew up looking for the mines on foot, but now he uses a drilling device in the back of his pickup truck. There is a high probability of mineralization in this southwest fault system.
Red Creek Complex is the basal unit to the Uinta Mountains. It's over 2.3 billion years old. And it's in the fault zones that run through here. This here is the South Flank Fault System. The Uintas, per se, don't have any igneous rocks affiliated with them, especially in the South Flank Fault. The theory was years ago that you had to have igneous rocks in order to have mineral deposits, because that would generate the hot water to create the mineral deposits. And since many mineral deposits are associated with igneous rocks, that if you got out of an igneous type terrain or very far away from igneous rocks, that you wouldn't have very good chance of finding material. But since that time, everybody has come to learn that you can have water heated more shallow in the earth or not associated with volcanics or intrusive rocks. The South Flank Fault right here has access to very hot waters at depth, and you get a convection system moving up and down the fault, and that leaches minerals and metals from down underneath because of the hot. As it ascends, like the geysers in Yellowstone, it gets cooler and cooler, and when it hits the right rock and the right temperature, it deposits the metals, and then the cold water goes back down to be reheated and recycled back up.
Russ leads us into a rock garden to look at the type of layers he's been drilling through. Due to the solitary nature of Russ's lifestyle here at 10,000 feet, we realize he has rarely taken his truck in for a tune-up.
Yeehaw!
So those colors are the oxidization process, correct?
Right. It's this open spaces like this that allow those minerals that were once here, indicated by all this colorization on the rock, to leach and go back down until it hits the water table. To give you an idea of what we have to drill through up here to find this ore in this shear zone is, this is quartzite, the most durable rock there is. We'll eat your bet. This is the worst rock I've ever tried to drill in 30 years of drilling.
But it's still well worth your time.
Yeah, because we know what's down below.
We meet with Charmaine up at the Snowbird Ski Resort in the Wasatch Forest. She's a forest archaeologist and over the years has seen an influx of Rhoades Mines prospectors.
We have a number of people who prospect on national forest lands, for example, under special use permits. They're legitimate prospectors. They abide by the rules. They renew their claims year after year, even though they are not finding anything at all. The people who are really damaging are the ones who do not have permits and who are not thinking about the long-term implications of mining in an area. They're just looking for that gold.
Whether they're actually looking for gold or have a fishing pole in one hand and a metal detector in the other, any person that comes on the reservation has to have some type of a permit in their possession to perform whatever activity that they're doing. If you come on Ute lands and you are caught, then you're going to have to deal with the system as it stands. We'd like to deter any type of activity. It's a sacred mine, and if the mine is there, or any mine on Indian land for that matter, it belongs to the tribe, and it's there for the tribe's use and benefit.
As we all know through history, the last 150 years, the white man wants the gold, they're going to take it away somewhere or another. Legal or illegal, they'll take it.
Mormon historians will tell you that their treatment of the Indians was better than other places. Not so. It fits exactly the pattern in American Indian history. The whites come, they move in, they take the resources, and they remove the Indians. And in 1861, when Mormons were asked what they wanted from the federal government, it was to remove the Indians. And that's why Lincoln set aside a reservation in eastern Utah.
The chief of the tribes, the bands in the Utah Valley, before they were removed to the Uinta Valley, this must have been right around the 1860s, is quoted as saying, "Why can't we all live together?" It's because way back in the 1860s, you all didn't want to live with us. You wanted us removed so you could take advantage of our resources, of the resources of our homeland. We ate fish out of the Utah Lake, native cutthroat. It was a beautiful lake. Now it's polluted.
The Utes signed a treaty with the United States called the Spanish Fork Treaty in 1865, but the government refused to ratify the treaty.
Brigham Young was there at the ceremony, and he told the Indians, quite frankly, that this valley and that valley and the next valley and all the valleys belong to the Lord. And he said that the Mormon settlers intended to settle in all the valleys of Utah until they had it all. And that this treaty and the provisions of the treaty was really the last chance for the Indians to salvage land that was really the handwriting on the wall. For several years, the Indians honestly believed that by signing this treaty, it was a done deal, but it wasn't, because in 1869, again, the U.S. Senate officially rejected ratification of the Spanish Fork Treaty. It was not exactly the best of times. It was really the worst of times. It was just bad times for the Indians.
Maybe Brigham Young was a good man. Maybe he was a visionary. Maybe he was way ahead of his people and wanted to see the two cultures blend, in which case he would be a visionary. And perhaps his people were not willing to integrate with the Ute. And that explains why the Utes were removed, displaced, the Uinta Basin.
The death of Ute Chief Walker and Brigham Young probably ended Caleb's journeys to the sacred mine. But there were other Spanish mines that he could still work. However, Caleb's days of free gold and uninhibited travel in the Uintas were rapidly changing.
About 1894, there was an act of Congress passed which opened up some of the Indian lands to their exploration of minerals. And Caleb saw in this an opportunity maybe to develop his mine. And now with the opening of the reservation lands to mineral exploration, he needed to take on a partner who could help him develop this. For this cause, he took in a remarkable man named F.W.C. Hathenbrook. Hathenbrook was a doctor who lived at Provo and operated a small mercantile store there. He was very familiar with both the minerals in the region, and he was also very popular among the Ute Indians. Before he would agree to do anything, he wanted to be taken to the mine itself and shown. And so for the first time in the history of the mines, Caleb Rhoades took another individual to the place and showed him, and Hathenbrook was more than convinced. In fact, he said it exceeded all expectation, that the mine contained, as we find later from one of his reports, it contained a vein running up in the tunnel at an angle from the floor through the ceiling and developing between 2 to 6 feet in length. They then went into the reservation and tried to obtain a lease from the Indians themselves on the lands, which they had to do in order to make the Mineral Act valid.
Caleb and Hathenbrook worked the Granddaddy Lakes region in the Uintas. Some of the maps they left show this area in detail. With some luck, you can find the remnants of Hathenbrook's hidden cabin and some of their workings in the area. With the help of a forest ranger, Byron, we were able to find Hathenbrook's isolated cabin. But unfortunately, we weren't the first.
This looks like one of the shafts that Hathenbrook dug while he had the mine claim here, and it looks like somebody's been trying to fish around in there and extract some of the, see how deep it is, and move some of the props. Right here, it looks like we've got a ditch that was constructed by whoever was running the mining operation. We assume Hathenbrook constructed this ditch, probably to divert this stream, so the water from this stream would run down to that shaft that we first looked at, and with the water they were able to process the rock that they were taking out of that shaft. Many people know that this is the Hathenbrook's cabin, and you can see some of the damage that they've been done, digging holes. A lot of work went into creating this cabin, and so it's kind of a shame that it's all fallen apart at this point. We're still not sure how to preserve and protect this site, because with the interest in the Spanish gold, people wanting to come up here and continue to search for gold that was supposedly left here, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to stop damage to the site without a 24-hour guard.
After the U.S. government realized the potential wealth locked away in the little-known Uinta Mountains, they began to revise the boundary lines of the Ute Reservation, which made it difficult for Caleb and Hathenbrook to work their mines.
When Caleb Rhoades applied to Congress to have the boundaries changed to allow him to file his claims throughout the Uintas. He offered to pay off the national debt before he removed any gold for himself, and he felt confident he could do so.
Utah was growing rapidly, and outsiders were hearing tales of amazing riches. Jesse Knight owned some of the wealthiest mines in Utah. Reed Smoot was one of Utah's most well-known senators. They secretly formed the Florence Mining Company to find the Uinta treasure.
Reed Smoot worked closely with Hathenbrook and Rhoades while he was alive, promising them full support in everything, reveal everything you have to me. I will see that the other senators comply. It wasn't until later that Hathenbrook realized that Smoot and others were taking this information to organize their own companies, their own investors, to go into the reservation lands and find it and open it up themselves and bypass Rhoades and Hathenbrook altogether. When Hathenbrook discovered this, he had to hire gunfighters to go in and protect his right. The government wanted to open the reservation lands, but they needed Indian consent. And the Indians wouldn't give the consent to the government because they were holding it for Rhoades and Hathenbrook. And Hathenbrook had greater influence than the government with the Indians. So they had to eliminate Hathenbrook in order to get the Indians to sign their lands over. So it was a very complex intrigue that played out over a period of several decades. And in the interim, in 1905, Caleb Rhoades died, which left only Hathenbrook with the secret of the location of the mine.
On his deathbed, Caleb revealed important information about the mines to his wife, Sidzi. In addition to maps, Caleb uttered an important yet mysterious clue about the Uinta mines. The information given was 2 words: Low Pass. The maps of the mines that Caleb gave Sidzi proved to be too difficult for her to interpret.
No discoveries were really made by the Florence Company, the Raving Company. They combined to form the Florence and Raving Company. I believe that what happened was, with the death of Caleb Rhoades, the validity or potential validity of the locations of some of these mines disappeared with his death.
John Duncan was the head chief of the Uinta Band, and he had provided testimony to the effect that he was aware there was gold on the reservation, and he knew where it was. For a time, he promised to actually act as scout in taking the Florence Mining Company engineers to the locations where the gold could be found. However, he never did this. He told the Florence Mining Company officials that you can go anywhere you want on the reservation and you can look for gold. And he said you will go bankrupt for your efforts because there's only one place on the entire reservation where you will actually find gold.
Hathenbrook fought against Congress, gunmen, claim jumpers, a number of problems to try to develop and open up the mines. In fact, one of the first men he wrote to help him with his problem was Butch Cassidy. And Butch Cassidy and Elza Lay wrote back to him and told him that in sort of cryptic language, they just robbed the bank in Montpelier, Idaho. They had to go south for a while where the weather fit their clothes and they wouldn't be able to help him. But they referred him to others that could put him in touch with some of the gunfighters who could help protect his interests. He hired Matt Warner, who was sort of a lieutenant of the Wild Bunch at the time, to help him to go in and protect one of his areas against these other investors who had also hired their own gunfighters. Hathenbrook, however, lost ultimately. The lands were taken off, made into a forest reserve. These companies went on to the reservation lands, former reservation lands, and hunted for the mines and couldn't find them. It was sort of a Mexican standoff. Hathenbrook knew where the mines were and couldn't mine them. The government didn't know, but needed to know or wanted to know, and Hathenbrook wouldn't tell them. So in his old age, Hathenbrook had the potential of being the wealthiest man in the world, but he couldn't mine the mine. And so consequently, he sold sewing machines and insurance door to door to eke out a living the last several years of his life, and died virtually a pauper in the 1920s.
Many gold-eyed individuals have hunted for the Lost Rhoades Mines with little or no success. Paul Tabby takes us into the desolate high desert near the Uintas. As a young man, he caught wild horses in this untamed land. He holds this particular area sacred and claims that few people have witnessed this magical rock treasure.
When I was about 8, 9 years old, we used to run cattle about 4 or 5 miles from this spot. Now, we was out cattle one day, seen tracks heading up toward this draw, so we were sent to go get the stray cattle. Followed the tracks up this draw and stumbled on this rock. We've always called this picture rock for lack of a better name. Now, throughout my life, I've found panels that's more spectacular, but I've yet to see any that's as intriguing as this rock I'm sitting on right now. I've always been interested in preserving sites like this. And for many years, the best way of preserving was just to keep them secret. I would not bring anybody to places like this.
You find new stuff every time you come here and look?
Yes, I do find new things every time I come through here. Every time I think I've seen everything, I take a closer look or look at it from a different angle and see things I haven't seen before. And I come here, as often as I can, just to look at it. When I first seen this, I know Indiana Jones wasn't out by then, but you had that same feeling that you've made some major find that might be significant to unlocking the key of the history of this area. But then you get older, and the more you look at it, the more mystery it adds to the history of this area. There are a number of figures in this panel that have little wavy arms with the seemingly webbed fingers. This is a figure that appears to be wearing a same sort of headdress type thing you'd find in the Middle East, maybe India or Pakistan. Some kind of turban apparatus, a top knot and everything here.
The interpretation of this panel's message lies in one's own perception of the world. The story seems to unfold here about past explorers who were also on their own search for treasure. The rock was trying to reveal itself to us. Do these cryptic figures describe greed, gold, or God? This was to be the end of my quest, and even though I had not found the Rhoades Mines, I wasn't upset because it's the journey taken into the unknown that makes an adventure worthwhile. Minutes turned into hours in the hot desert sun as Paul and I relished the solitude of this day. We were parched, so Paul took us to a tranquil watering hole in the unusually low Green River. The cabin he grew up in was just up around the bend, but it's now just scattered dust and a faded memory, a little bit like life. During our year-long quest, Paul and I had become good friends. We were two entirely different people, yet we have come to realize that we shared many of the same qualities. It seemed that all people possess similar needs, wants, and desires. It's how we each pursue these factors that make us unique. We go to the small town of Hannah for a Fairwhale Mountain Lemonade. Caleb Rhoades used to stop in this quaint canyon country to gear up for his own journeys into the unknown. I could sense that Paul's mind was restless over something important, but I never could have guessed what that was.
There are minerals in the Uintas. There are minerals in the Uintas. These places do exist. They do exist. And they're hidden for a good reason. These places were shown to me. It's not right for me to use them for my benefit. I just don't want people to have the incentive to go looking for these if these things are filmed, you know, but they are there. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up that they're going to be rich, because they'll never find this place. They'll never find it. There's one mine I can show you. We're going to go to it in the dark. You can know the general area you're in, but you'll never find it again.
Under the cover of night, Paul led me into an area of the Uintas that I had never explored. We used flashlights sparingly in this dark country because Paul did not want to stir the spirits and protective forces that oversee the secret location of this mine. We came upon a hillside with an indiscreet layer of pine needles and twigs. Underneath this natural blanket of earth was a basketball-sized entrance into a well-concealed mine. Fortunately, this tunnel would be impossible for me to ever find again.
You can't spend too much time here. A lot of arsenic. How old is this mine? I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you. Yeah, that's a good vein there.
What is there?
Silver.
How far back does this thing go?
About another 40 foot. This is what they was after. Right here. Now, I'm not sure if these samples out of here have been assayed or not, but this silver. This is what they're looking for, this right here. Black stuff right here. That's a good vein right there. See, they missed it and they's running something similar at the bottom. They missed this top one. This wasn't dug. This is caved in. This kind of yellowish stuff right here, it fluoresces in that light you got. And this is a different kind of color. I ain't seen it here before. I'd like y'all to bring an ultraviolet in here, see what fluoresces.
Is that silver?
This, yes. But whatever this yellow stuff is, your light's picking up. I haven't seen it in your kind of light. You know, it's not that rich in gold, but there's a hell of a lot of silver in here. Where's that visible gold? It's behind him, ain't it?
There's some back
Right around
there.
the corner.
Let's go check it out.
You see that? Right in there. Very small particles.
Move the light slightly. Let's go.
Because this arsenic will kill us. Yeah. This is so much rich arsenic in here, you wouldn't believe it. This is solid arsenic.
That's the kind of veins everybody's looking for. That's the treasure hunter type vein. They're looking for veins of solid metal.
If developed, this mine could produce vast wealth. However, those who have taken an oath to protect its integrity would never allow that to happen. Even though Paul lives a simple life in regards to monetary value, greed would never rule his belief of protecting this area. Unfortunately, Paul and other Uinta ranchers have been nearly wiped out during this age of severe drought.
And it's not the money. Only a fool would get in the cattle business expecting to get rich off it. It's a lifestyle. Something we're proud of doing. We're not gonna make no money on it.
After completion of this film, Paul passed away from the complications of bone cancer. During our difficult mountain journeys, he never once complained to me of his pain and suffering. Paul, an Uncompahgre Ute Indian, became more than just my guide. He will forever be my friend. With the growing consumption of our modern world, some things are better left undisturbed. The sanctity, solitude, and history of its native people are the true treasures in the Uinta Mountains.
For our people, they always said that gold was no good, it'll make you sick. And as we come to find out today that sickness is greed. Those people who chase that gold are after that greed. They have that greed and it lives in them.
The Rhoades story and a lot of these other Spanish mine stories really are classic legends, classic folklore. We tell them to each other over campfires and dinner tables because they help create a kind of mythic and larger-than-life history for Utah. And we seem to desperately want to have this kind of mythic past for ourselves. But in reality, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, what aspects of the authentic Ute history and early Spanish history, legitimate Spanish history, have we lost by embellishing the past to the point of creating these mythic stories out of the past for Utah?
The perception is that we've made no contribution to society whatsoever. Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he was general, he made the comment that the way to destroy a people is to take away their history. And that's absolutely the case here. The history of the Indian people of the state of Utah has been taken away. I didn't learn about the true history of my people until I graduated from college.
As far as the tribe as a government, they would like to know where places like this exist. I will not divulge to them where places like this exist. Because if I did, they're no different to me than the white man is. They're revolved around the almighty dollar also.
There is a problem in history, and it's called presentism. That means that we interpret the past by what we know presently. That's a very dangerous thing to do. For instance, it shocks Mormons when they find out on the shipping lists of things that Brigham Young ordered that he ordered tobacco and wine. Well, that's an example that someone writing about him now from his family probably would not include that evidence.
When I began my search for gold, I stopped to have my fortune told. Silently her fingers traced my hand. I asked, "What will my future be?" The only word she said to me was sand. I laughed at her and traveled on until one day I stood upon the border of a God-forsaken land. I knew those hills had gold to fetch just across that little stretch of sand. Darling, just wait a little longer. I'll soon be by your side again. I'm almost at the rainbow's end. My burro died 2 days ago, my water's gone, my step is slow, it's still so far to where the mountains stand. Not another living soul, just a poisoned water hole and sand. It's getting mighty hard to see, the desert's playing tricks on me. Is that my darling, holding out her hand? My arms reach out, my fingers clutch, but Lord above me, all I touch is sand. Darling, wait for me no longer. My mortal strength is gone at last, the spark of life is fading fast. Fortune waits for other men, but for me the rainbow's end is sand.